Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for August the 4th. Today we are reading together. I just realized I failed to update the slide, but we're going to read chapter 26 and 27 together because they go pretty well together, I think, and lead in well to chapter 28. And 27 is a short chapter, so we will go ahead and knock that out today. So just pay attention if you're following along on your schedule. Just bump everything up a day and you'll be right on track. I'll probably print some more of the sheets out so you can grab a new one just to stay updated. But we'll read together, like I said, chapters 26 and 27, where we're going to see the next opportunity that David has really to end this whole saga between him and Saul. And yet he's not going to do that. We're going to see his explanation for why. And really, I would say these are probably two of this instance where he does in 26 and where he does it again in 24. Those are two probably instances of David's greatest faith during this whole saga. But then we follow it up in chapter 27 with a moment where faith probably isn't the foremost thing on David's mind, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. So let's read together here 1 Samuel 26 and 1 Samuel 27. First Samuel chapter 26, verse number 1. Then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, David is hiding on the hill of Hakilah, opposite Yeshimon. So Saul, accompanied by 3,000 of the fit young men of Israel, went immediately to the wilderness of Ziph to search for David there. La deja vu, right? Saul camped beside the road at the hill of Hakilah, opposite Yeshimon, and David was living in the wilderness and discovered Saul had come there after him. So David sent out spies and knew for certain that Saul had come. Immediately, David went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw the place where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of his army, were lying down. Saul was lying inside the inner circle of the camp with the troops camped around him. Then David asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, who will go with me into the camp to Saul? I'll go with you, answered Abishai. That night, David and Abishai came to the troops, and Saul was lying there asleep in the inner circle of the camp with his spear stuck in the ground by his head. Abner and the troops were lying around him. Then Abishai said to David, Today, God has delivered your enemy to you. Let me thrust the spear through him into the ground just once. I won't even have to strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, Don't destroy him, for who can lift a hand against Yahweh's anointed and be innocent? David added, As Yahweh lives, Yahweh will certainly strike him down. Either his day will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. However, as Yahweh is my witness, I will never lift my hand against Yahweh's anointed. Instead, take the spear and the water jug by his head, and let's go. So David took the spear and the water jug by Saul's head, and they went their way. No one saw them, no one knew them, or no one knew, and no one woke up. They all remained asleep because a deep sleep from Yahweh came over them. David crossed the other side and stood on top of the mountain at a distance. There was a considerable space between them. Then David shouted to the troops and to Abner, son of Ner, Aren't you going to answer, Abner? Who are you who calls to the king? Abner asked. David called to Abner, You're a man, aren't you? Who in Israel is your equal? So why didn't you protect your lord the king when one of the people came to destroy him? What you have done is not good. As Yahweh lives, all of you deserve to die, since you didn't protect your lord, Yahweh's anointed. Now look around. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were by his head? Saul recognized David's voice and asked, Is that your voice, my son David? It is my voice, my lord and king, David said. Then he continued, Why is my lord pursuing his servants? What have I done? What crime have I committed? Now may my lord the king please hear the words of his servant. If it is Yahweh who has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. But if it is people, may they be cursed in the presence of Yahweh. For today they have banished me from sharing in the inheritance of Yahweh, saying, Go and worship other gods. So don't let my blood fall to the ground far from Yahweh's presence. For the king of Israel has come out to search for a single flea, like one who pursues a partridge in the mountains. Saul responded, I have sinned. Come back, my son David. I will never harm you again because today you have considered my life precious. I have been a fool. I've committed a grave error. David answered, Here is the king's spear. Have one of the young men come over and get it. Yahweh will repay every man for his righteousness and his loyalty. I wasn't willing to lift a hand against Yahweh's anointed, even though Yahweh handed you over to me today. Just as I considered your life valuable today, so may Yahweh consider my life valuable and rescue me from all trouble. Saul said to him, You are blessed, my son David. You will certainly do great things and will also prevail. Then David went on his way, and Saul returned home. David said to himself, 1 Samuel chapter 27 and verse number 1, David said to himself, one of these days, I'll be swept away by Saul. There was nothing better for me than to escape immediately to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me everywhere in Israel, and I'll escape from him. So David set out with his 600 men and went over to Achish, son of Maok, the king of Gath. David and his men stayed with Achish in Gath. Each man had his own family with him. And David had his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, Nabal's widow. When it was reported to Saul that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Now David said to Achish, If I have found favor with you, let me be given a place in one of the outlying towns so I can live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you? That day Achish gave Ziklag to him, and it still belongs to the kings of Judah today. The length of time that David stayed in Philistine territory amounted to a year and 4 months. David and his men went up and raided the Jeshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. From ancient times, they had been the inhabitants of the region through Shur, as far as the land of Egypt. Whenever David attacked the land, he did not leave a single person alive, either man or woman, but he took flocks, herds, donkeys, camels, and clothing. Then he came back to Achish, who inquired, Where did you raid today? David replied, The south country of Judah, the south country of the Jerahmeelites, and the south country of the Kenites. David did not let a man or woman live to be brought to Gath, for he said, Or they will inform on us and say, This is what David did. This was David's custom during the whole time he stayed in Philistine territory. So Achish trusted David, thinking he has made himself repulsive to his people Israel. He will be my servant forever. And that is 1 Samuel chapters 26 and 27. You know, we have the little interlude which tells us the story involving David's interaction with Nabal and Abigail that separates the two chapters 24 and 26. So if we just pick up randomly in chapter 26, we're thinking, okay, well, this is normal. This is what you expect from David and his relationship with Saul. It was most certainly a toxic one, so it's not surprising that Saul would be pursuing David, except that we have read chapter 24, which very much mirrors what we have here in chapter 26, which is an opportunity where David had to kill Saul, and he didn't, and Saul seems to relent from his pursuit of David. Seems to. But we see again, sometime later on, that ends up not being the case. That once again, these Ziphites, these stinking Ziphites who were little snitches, they tell Saul where David is. Saul pursues him into the wilderness. David knows where Saul is. It seems that that's really the way it goes. David always knows where Saul is, can get to Saul easily, but the same's not true the other way around. So whenever Saul and his army, whenever they are camped, David knows the location, and David's going to take one of his closest men. It ends up being Abishai, and they're going to go into the camp. Saul is at the center, surrounded by his guards, which makes sense. You would put the most important thing in the center, to where anyone who wanted to intrude would have to go through a number of guards, a number of fighters and warriors in order to get to the king. But David and Abishai will just sneak right in there. And we're told later on in verse number 12 why that was the case. It was because Yahweh had made a deep sleep to fall upon them. Well, Abishai is looking into the situation and he's thinking, well, look at this, David. God has certainly delivered your enemy to you. Let me just run him through once. All I need is one thrust of the spear, and I can end this with certainty, and it's going to be all over with. I won't even have to do it twice. But David says what he says back in chapter 24, that no, we're not going to do that. You're not going to destroy him or lift a hand against Yahweh's anointed. Because as Yahweh lives, he will certainly strike him down. He's either going to kill him, or he's either going to die of natural causes of old age, or he's going to die in battle. But either way, Yahweh's got this. And we put that together with chapter 25. Yahweh can be trusted to deal with fools and oppressors. He can be trusted to deal with Nabal as he did, and can also be trusted to deal with the oppressor like Saul is. Just let him work that out. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to take the spear and the jug, and we're going to show Saul that you need to pay attention. If I really wanted to, I could have ended this. So they take those two things. They end up going further on they end up going further away from the camp on the other side on this hill. They yell back to they yell back to Abner, and they're like, Abner, you're not very good at your job. You think that you're the best thing in Israel. You think that you're something because you killed all of those priests and their families. But look, you're sleeping on the job. I could have taken out your king, and you would be responsible for it. Saul hears his voice. Is that you, David? Yeah, that's me. And you need to listen, Saul. Why? Why do you continue to pursue me? What have I done? What crime have I committed? It is again chapter 24 repeated, almost the exact same conversation. He does change it up though in verses or in verse number 19, the latter half of 19. If it is Yahweh who has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. May he be honored by this. But if it is the people, may they be cursed in the presence of Yahweh. If they're trying to tell you that I'm after you, that's not the case, or that's not the case. So I'll tell you what it's really resulted in, though. It makes me want to leave. It makes me almost want to leave Israel and to go and worship pagan gods. That's where I'm being pushed. That's what I'm being pushed to do. So Saul, please don't let my blood fall on the ground far from Yahweh's presence. Don't let that be the case, please. Don't continue to pursue me, like a single flea, someone that's not really dangerous to you. Don't do that. What does Saul say? Saul says, okay, I've sinned. Just come back. I will never harm you. You've considered my life precious. I've been a fool. I've committed great evil. Is that true? Is Saul being genuine here? I don't know. I'm not really convinced either way that this is Saul being genuine here in this moment. David, I think by his actions, probably doesn't trust Saul in being all that genuine, because he doesn't go to him. He says, no, here's your spear, here's your jug. You can send somebody else to come get it. Yahweh sees all this. He sees what you've done. He sees what I've done. He will repay every man for his righteousness and loyalty. I wasn't willing to lift my hand against his anointed, just as I considered your life valuable. I hope that Yahweh considers my life valuable and will rescue me from all trouble. Saul responds, I think, the right way. You are blessed, my son. You're going to do great things, going to prevail. And then they go their separate ways. It seems as if things are on a good foot now. You would think that because Yahweh has delivered him once again, that David would, I don't know if he would go home. I don't really know exactly what the appropriate move would be here if he truly believed this was the case. What I can say, though, is I'm not convinced that he truly believed this was the case. I'm not convinced that he truly believed that Yahweh considered his life valuable and rescue him from all trouble, because he does the very thing he says the people are forcing him to do in chapter 27. He leaves the promised land. He leaves Israelite territory and he goes into Philistine territory. He goes into the territory of the enemy. He goes in chapter 27 and verse number 1, one of these days, Saul's going to get me. So I guess the only thing I can do then, the best thing I can do is to go ahead and take off toward the to the Philistine territory. I'll just go live there. So he takes his men and his men's families, and David takes his own wives. Then they end up going to Achish in the city of Gath. And remember, we've already seen David visit this particular place. Let's see here. That was all the way back in chapter. Oh, I should have written this down. Let's see. I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna guess chapter 21. That's my guess. Let's see if I'm right here. Chapter 21. Nailed it. That was honestly, that was truly lucky. Chapter 21, in verses 10 through 15. Chapter 21, verses 10 through 15. David's already gone here once, and he had to feign craziness, and Achish ended up letting him leave. So what's the difference here? Why does he go to Achish now in peace, it seems? And why does he not feign the craziness? Why is he okay going here? Why does he feel comfortable living in the Philistine territory at this point? Well, it seemed to be that the principle at play here is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That both Achish and David share Saul as an enemy. So if he's the enemy, then they could seemingly be peaceful with one another. So David's there, all of his men are there, and he tells Achish, I don't have to stay here in Gath. Give me another place to live, though. That way I'm not, burdened on your resources. That way I'm not bothering you. So he gives them Ziklag, and he ends up going out there. But the advantage of Ziklag is that this gives him some anonymity. This gives him some secrecy to be able to do what he does, which is begins to raid the enemies of Israel. Even though he has left Israel, he is seemingly still helping Israel by going out and fighting against the Geshurites and the Gerzites and the Amalekites. He ends up going into these areas and fighting against them and raiding against them. Now, Achish, whenever David comes back, says, "Oh, where'd you go today?" David frames it as, "Oh, I went to the south country of Judah." Went where these, Israelite, went into this Israelite territory, which was true. That's where he went in, but he did not fight against Israelites. Instead, he fought against pagans. Achish doesn't seem to know that, though. He frames it as if he's going to fight against his own people, David does, but really he's fighting against the enemy. Now, how is he able to get away with this? He's able to get away with this because he did not leave a single person alive, either man or woman. So he really just goes on a blood rampage here, killing everyone in order to keep his secret alive. Now, in the meantime, in the 16 months that he's doing this, Achish is led to believe the entire time that, David's on his side. No way is David ever going to go back to Israel because he's fighting against Israel. So he's going to be my servant forever. So our question is, is this David's new future? Is this his new destiny, to be just in the eyes of Achish, a mercenary against Israel? Is that who he's going to be? Well, we're going to see the issue that raises up in chapter 28, in that Achish believes that's who David's going to be. So we'll see how that ends up turning out in chapter 28 in our read tomorrow. But let's notice something else that's missing in chapter 27. You can notice this very quickly, very easily, in just going through the read. I'm going to throw it back up on the screen again. Look very quickly with me at chapter 27. Beginning here, let's just skim through here real fast. You should be able to notice this. What do you not see in chapter 27? Well, you don't see any yellow, which means any reference to who is missing. Well, any reference to God is missing. There is no presence of God in chapter 27 at all, which is really sad. It's really sad and disappointing to think that in all of this, in this entire chapter, in this 16 months, God is not present, which is just so, to me at least, it makes me scratch my head and rack my brain trying to figure out how is David doing this? How does he go from being so focused on Yahweh and his will in chapter 26 to chapter 27, not consulting Yahweh? There was no consulting of ephod or no consulting of the priest here. There was no consulting with Yahweh. It was just David relying upon himself, thinking, Again, he says in 26, in chapter 26, verse 24, may Yahweh consider my life valuable and rescue me from all trouble. Just saying in chapter 27, verse number 1, of these days I'll be swept away by Saul. There is nothing better for me than to escape immediately to the land of the Philistines. What happened to him trusting in Yahweh? What happened to that? I don't know exactly. I don't really have a good answer. Maybe you do. If you do, please feel free to leave that comment in the comment section below. But just notice what issues arise when Yahweh is not considered. Number one, David leaves the promised land for pagan territory. Number two, he has to just lie and deceive Achish for 16 full months in order to carry out this plan. He's surely, during all this, living in constant terror that his plan might be found out. And then finally, at the end of the day, we're going to see in chapter 28 tomorrow that he gets him into a real sticky situation here. He's between all the sayings. He's in a sticky situation. It's between a rock and a hard place. He's got a tough pickle here, whatever you want to say. David's in that situation now. And he's in that situation because he did not trust Yahweh. But instead, he relied upon his own wit and scheming plans in order to work something out. And again, just shows us number one, what happens whenever Yahweh isn't considered. And really just, I hope, as much as we love David, as much as we appreciate David, as much as David is, the type of Christ, he's still a flawed man. So as one writer said, this chapter really helps us to avoid hero worship, for there are no true heroes to worship in Scripture except Jesus alone. So let's think about that as we meditate upon these two texts together today. And we'll see tomorrow, again, what's going to happen now that David is in this difficult situation. We'll be thinking about that then. Thank you for tuning into this reading on this Friday. Hope you will join me again tomorrow as we read in chapter 28. And I hope you have a great rest of your Friday. Again, if you have any questions or comments about these texts, please leave that in the comment section below. Again, have a good rest of your Friday, everyone. Take care and God bless.